Here tonight, we are gathered in order to discuss a very pressing issue, that of building the climate justice movement in 2021. From here in Climate Convergence, where I am an organizer, again, my name is Allison Bodine, and I'm a central organizer with Climate Convergence and your MC here tonight. We have been thinking of this question since the pandemic began here in Canada in March. Throughout the fall of 2020, poor and working people in British Columbia and Canada continued to face the brunt of the economic and health crisis brought on by the government mismanagement of a COVID-19 pandemic. At the same time, big oil and gas continued to expand. Even during the pandemic, at least 2.5 billion taxpayer dollars from the federal government's COVID-19 relief package were funneled into mega projects that violate Indigenous rights and destroy invaluable ecosystems. In British Columbia, these climate-destroying projects included the Coastal GasLink fracked gas pipeline in Wet'suwet'en, the Site C Dam in the Peace River Valley, and the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion, TMX. We've also been hearing much about the Line 3 pipeline struggle and the continued struggle against the Dakota Access Pipeline. So I'm honored to be able, in the context of looking at 2020 and the challenges and looking forward to 2021, to be with you here tonight. I also want to recognize that this webinar is being broadcast from the unceded Coast Salish territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, and Squamish peoples. And before we go any further, I want to welcome Coast Salish elder and leading Indigenous organizer, Kelly White, to open us here on our webinar tonight. Please join me in welcoming Kelly.
HYLCM, CIM. Shakwimintomi Kiachitin. In our language, we're thankful and grateful that you're here. Kalamia Ata Lilawashte, thank you. It is good in the spirit to be with you. We offer a song from the ones that sacrifice also their lives in the abortion of justice, the mines. We thank you for
Sorry, Kelly.
Yeah.
We've encountered our first roadblock. I need you to enter into the English interpretation section again. So go down to the bottom.
Okay.
And press English.
Okay. Okay.
I think that will work.
Am I good now? Hello.
Yes, you're good.
C'est bien. That's my bilingual for the day now. Okay.
Yeah, you're great, Kelly. Go ahead.
Okay. Great honor to be with you. Healing our nations of united resistance to apathy. Haichka CM. Thank you, our relations. So CIM. The spirit within you. With Haichka, we thank you. Kiachtan, we're grateful. The Kanak, the Mana Lil Tia CCO, that you have humbled pity on the grandmother earth and the grandfather earth spirits. Haichka Siam, Chetquimintomi, Haichka relatives were thankful. Great spirit of all good, put within your heart, mind, body, and soul, in charge of humble to speak for the sacred life of Mother Earth, Haichka Siam. From our families, the ones that are killed for the mines, our bears. We sing a song of our bears and our eagles. Only the eagle could fly higher than anyone. And we thank you for taking the message on the eagle's back, that message so everyone could feel, taste, and live that good message of humble for our homo, the life that is sacred, our relatives. Our bear song, we thanks for all the four-leggeds, the swimmers, the flyers, the ones that crawl on the earth, our relatives that live with us that are sacrificed for that almighty mind, the dollar. And the 6-day fast today, relatives. And thank you. And with these songs, and to thank our grand ancestry for the strength that they have to share with us the knowledge of the stars. So strong that you're here now. Haichkasiam. La 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 he la he la he la hey yo hey yo he la he la he la he la he la he la hey yo hey hela, hela, hela. And our berry picking song to let the bears know we're coming and we're gonna take all the berries. And our eagle song. That's our eagle song from Lilwat Nation, one of our 7 dialects of Salish Nation. In our bear song, they suffer hard. They're trying to get by same as us. And the Muxin, the Ganak is the umbilical cord, the life speaker through the mouth. Thank you, and the best to you this evening. We look forward to the heart of your medicine, your messages, and look forward to anticipate supporting the endeavors that you're involved in, sister to sister and brothers and sisters helping one another. Uh, Thankful for the strength of your ancestors that will see us through. I'm grateful to feel the strength of sisterhood here because, in my life, I'm only in my 60s, and we were taught we were the problem my whole entire life. And I know through these songs and our language, we're the heart of the earth, the indigenous people of the world, wherever we're from. Everyone is sacred. Everyone is from a land that is sacred. Every nationality in the Mother Earth is our family. And we're thankful to join the international community this evening with your strong heart, mind, body, and soul, and anticipate supporting one another in endeavors that you're involved in. Thank you, our relatives. The high spirit within you. We won't be the same after this evening. Take it away, Allison.
Thank you so much to Kelly White for your continued work for humanity and for the planet. It is great to have you here with us tonight. And we really welcome you all the times that we can meet. We miss you very much being out on the streets, and it's great to have you with us here tonight. So tonight's program spreads 3 continents. We're going to have speakers from both North and South America and the Caribbean, as well as from Europe. Some of the speakers are going to be in video because it is a very late hour of the night, and some will be live. And we'll be able to have a question and answer following the presentations. So I want to encourage people to please put your questions in the question and answer box. When it comes to the chat, it should be open to everyone to place any comments or things you would like to share tonight in the chat. I also, for anyone that has joined, tonight is being simultaneously translated, and I encourage you to press at the bottom of your screen the option that looks like a globe to participate in English or Spanish. If you're not hearing translation and you haven't figured out this option, then please chat the panelists in the chat and I will direct you on how you might be able to join. Also, the live stream link, which is being on Facebook, will be posted in the chat. Tonight's webinar is organized by Climate Convergence. We are a grassroots climate justice coalition here in Metro Vancouver. And we, as I started, have really had to change the way we work in 2020 with the pandemic. And now we see that 2021 has begun the way that 2020 finished, with an ongoing global pandemic and climate crisis, and an ongoing crisis of humanity, which continues reminding us all how interconnected humans are around the globe. We are also more aware every day of the possibilities of fighting back against environmental degradation when we work together in unity, and the devastating consequences if we do not. To start our program off today, I'm honored to introduce Candy White, who is Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara. She is currently lead organizer with the Indigenous Environmental Network, the IEN, on the Extreme Energy and Just Transition campaign, focusing at present on creating awareness about the environmentally and socially devastating effects of hydraulic fracturing or fracking on tribal lands, and working towards a just transition away from the fossil fuel industry. She was also an organizer and spokesperson during the struggle against the Dakota Access Pipeline at Standing Rock, a struggle that continues to this day. Please join me in welcoming Candy White.
Yeah.
Matagadads, Kelly. I very much appreciate your opening. I I will introduce myself in Hiradza. Dosha Margoet, Marshima Ishuia Hetz. And so, hello, relatives. My name is Eagle Woman. It was really empowering to hear an eagle song in the beginning here, as my son, who just turned 2, his name is also Winter Eagle. And so, again, Matsigaradz, thank you, Kelly, for bringing us into this meeting in a good way. As was mentioned, I am Mandan Hiradza Rikras, so I'm from Newtown, North Dakota, a little tiny town on the reservation called so-called Fort Berthold by the federal government, and I'm currently living in Montana. And as a representative of the Indigenous Environmental Network, I think it's really important, to bring up the issues of Line 3, the Dakota Access Pipeline, the Keystone XL, all of the struggles that we've been battling and fighting against to keep fossil fuels in the ground. And of course, going from a really wicked and evil Trump administration to a lesser wicked and evil Biden administration. There's a lot of work that has been done so far in this administration, but we cannot become complacent. We can't get stuck in apathy. And we have to remember that neoliberalism is pretty high in the United States. And so I would like to represent myself in the only way that I know is the best way, which is to tell you my story. As a person who grew up not really knowing what environmental justice was. I'm just a girl that grew up on a reservation in North Dakota and had to find out what EJ was, what CJ was, which is the story of a lot of us. Sometimes definitions don't mean anything to us. All we know is our reality and where we come from. And that's what I want to share a little bit with you today about. And then you can ask questions at the end about my community and then about what we're doing in a larger work as the Indigenous Environmental Network. And so, Thomas, can you give me a thumbs up if you're seeing these slides? Yeah? Okay. We are Earth Lodge dwelling people, the Mandan Hidatsa Rikara. We grew up living in earthen domes. We grew up growing corn, squash, and beans, relying on our natural resources to be able to help us survive in the world. This was prior to the quote industrial revolution. We didn't have pipelines. We didn't have oil and gas extraction, and yet we were able to thrive within our villages. We were forcibly placed on the reservation in 1860 by this now known as United States government. This picture you're seeing here is called like a fishhook village. It's a combination of kind of like pioneer homes, earth lodges, settler homes, when we were being forced to move into a reservation. And just to give you a sense of where this is North Dakota in the United States. And Fort Berthold is the reservation that I grew up on in Newtown here. So it is now about 1 million acres in size. At one time, it was 12 million acres, which was seceded by the federal government over executive orders over the past decades. What's unique about my reservation and others is that there's a series of dams that were placed right below our reservations. This was something that happened in US history because of the Pick-Sloan Act. There was all this flooding going on down in Missouri. And so they put a series of dams right below reservations. Ours is called the Garrison Dam. The one in Standing Rock was called the Hawaii Dam. It flooded all of our Class 1 and Class 2 agricultural lands and forced us to the high ground, forced us to be cowboys, basically, forced us to look after cattle. We were told that was the way we needed to now live. The Garrison Dam was an earthen dam structure that we did not agree to as Native nations, as the Mandan Hidatsa Rikara people. This is our tribal chairman, George Gillette, crying when this dam was signed into an act. It was already $60 million into construction by the time this picture was taken, even though we had said, no, we don't want this on a reservation. Following the Garrison Dam, we had to deal with power plants, coal mines, This is a picture showing you the coal mines that exist currently in my state of North Dakota, because we're now known as a fossil fuel state. We were taken in 7th grade to the coal mine and told that we needed to work in this industry. This is a picture of me with my arms crossed in 7th grade in a bucket that digs the coal, the liver, out of our earth. The reason I call it the liver is because as Native nations, we believe that when you dig into the earth, you physically dig into our bodies. The earth is made up of the same components that we are. Think of it as a water filter. When you have a water filter, it has a little filter in it. That filter is made out of coal. That coal filter filters your water. The same as the coal filter in the earth, the liver, the filter of our bodies that filters for us, being digged out and extracted every single day. And us as kids being told this is the industry that we should work in. Now, flash forward to about 2007, when the Bakken Shale oil boom started in North Dakota, making us the 3rd largest oil producing state in the country behind Alaska and Texas. Not being given a choice, once again, being told this is what was good for us. Same as when we were put on the reservation, same as when our dam was constructed, same as when the oil and coal came. We have a history of being told what's best for us. And this is a checkerboard. What it means is all of our land was allotted by the federal government. We were told what actually belonged to us as Native people, what belonged to the tribal government, what belonged to the federal government, and then what belonged to non-Native landowners. So even though we live on a reservation, we actually own less than half of our reservation. And we cannot tell an oil company or a neighbor next to us that we don't want to drill. They can do that individually with permits that they get from the state. We started seeing these oil wells going up all over. This land where my grandmother used to fast and pray and gather medicine was shut off and denied. North Dakota, we were once known as the breadbasket of the country. We now see industrial zoned fields. Instead of regular traffic, we now see trucks, road work, constantly, potholes, really dangerous potholes, and semis taking fresh water to people that are supposed to use this that are on cisterns. This is dangerous, this is deadly, and this is our reality as a result of the industry. And mind you, this is just one reservation in North Dakota where there are close to 600 federally recognized tribes in the United States. This is one reservation story. We have to deal with trucks dumping frack water on our roads and nobody telling them to stop. We have to deal with accidents that back up traffic for miles with no way forward in the way of resources to stop them. When a spill occurs like this one in 2014 that contaminates our land and Lake Sakakawea in the background, Lake Sakakawea is the Missouri River. The lake is a result of the dam that was created in the 1960s, but that is the Missouri River, which flows downstream. We were told that, don't worry, it's just water. It's just frack water that went on the land. And even though everything is still dead where that frack water touched, we're constantly told by even the EPA, the United States Environmental Protection Agency, not to worry. They put up sandbags and they tell us that this is going to save us. This is a picture that hasn't been treated at all of water that was taken out of Lake Sakakawea when my sister was swimming in it. I was told by the North Dakota State Health Department, but not to worry, this was just a blue-green algae bloom. I found out later that they're dangerous and they're toxic. You're not supposed to be swimming in it, let alone drinking it. And this was taken 1 mile from our water intake plant where we get water that we drink on Fort Berthold, a toxic blue-green algae bloom. And this all started when the oil industry started. You might be aware of the United States and the cities. So there's a picture here of all the cities on the coasts. California has some cities over here in the east. In North Dakota, if you've ever been there, You'll know we don't have a lot of big cities. So these aren't lights from cities, these are flares from the natural gas that is being flared as a byproduct as a result of the industry. When you go to Pennsylvania, when you talk about fracking in other places, they're going after the natural gas. In North Dakota, they're going after the oil. So flaring is done as a byproduct, putting methane into the atmosphere. And this is just a few pictures I took of what it looks like when I'm standing at home on the ground in North Dakota, of the flares and of all the chemical toxins and pollutants that we're breathing in. The air has become very toxic and contaminated. A lot of this is carcinogenic. Now stop a minute and think, does anyone know what carcinogenic means? I can tell you, carcinogenic means cancerous. And as a cancer survivor that technically really shouldn't be here today, based on what my doctors told me, I take this to heart. I have friends and relatives that also have had cancer, several friends and relatives, some of which aren't here today. You know, some who are my age. And you name a type of cancer, we've had it. And this is similar to the tar sands in Canada. You name a type of cancer, my friends in Canada have had it as a result of a toxic industry, which is fed to them and then to all of us downstream. Along with that came the man camps and the social problems that occur when thousands of men come into your community. Now, these are headlines that you'll never see on mainstream media. These are headlines that I took from our local newspapers, direct quote headlines of the things that have happened in my community as a result of the oil industry coming. When you talk about social justice and environmental justice, it's the exact opposite that's happening in my community. There is no environmental justice when the industry has a stronghold because of the power and the money that a certain government, in my case, the United States government, wants to have over other countries. My friends have died as a result of the industry, but people don't care. Ashley was addicted to heroin. She was 28 years old when her organs started to shut down. Her feet grew black and her hands grew black before she died. And yet we were dealing with a system that doesn't care because they say she was a druggie. And those drugs were brought as a result of the industry. And the same happened to Lisa. Her body shut down while her children, her 5 children, held her hands as they turned black and she died. We didn't have this kind of black heroin before the oil industry. We didn't have MS-13 in our community before the industry. And yet there's no resources for the people that are struggling because drugs follow the industry. Crime follows the industry. And that desecration of our earth happens to our people. This is a part of it. My cousin Daniel went missing in November of 2013, and he was found the following spring under the bridge, dead, having last been seen with 2 known gang members of MS-13, and yet there was never a conclusive reason we were given for his death. It was written off as an accident. Racism is exacerbated by the industry, by policies that allow the industry to continue to operate in our communities. This was found by elementary school children on a dumpster near Mandaree, North Dakota, where the height of the industry is taking place on our reservation. We have problems when it comes to the Dakota Access Pipeline, which we are still fighting. Today, we were finally told that we have to wait another 58 days for our current president, Joe Biden, to make a decision. So the decision was basically pushed down the road. We won't know for another 58 days what they're going to decide. And when we came together in Standing Rock in the Ocheti Shakowin, it was because we all had a common dream that we could stand together and, make our voices heard. We could speak out because, in the United States, we believe that we lived in an area where we had the right to practice the freedom of speech. Well, who knows how that ended? This slide shows you. We were forced out by over 28 entities of the United States government, including the military, including police forces, including Tiger Swan private security forces, because we wanted to protect water. My grandfather fought for this country in World War II and had 2 Purple Hearts. I'm really glad that he wasn't there to see what happened to us as a result of speaking out for our rights, because it would have broke his heart. People were injured in very grave ways, and I apologize if this is a bit graphic for some, but this isn't even the extent of the injuries that we faced at the hands of our own military, the people who are supposed to be protecting us. We literally had medicine in our hands and feathers in our hands, no weapons against our own weaponized military and police forces, to defend the sacred and to stand up for what is right. And while Standing Rock closed 4 years ago, the dream has continued. The fire has continued in our hearts. We've continued to fight internationally against REDS programs that are happening in other countries. Carbon trading, carbon markets, carbon capture, carbon sequestration, all of these things that are false solutions to the climate crisis that are happening on an international level, where people are being lied to about how these programs and projects within the United Nations are going to save us all. When we talk about false solutions to the climate crisis, this is what we're talking about. It doesn't stop this pollution at the source. It doesn't stop the desecration of the Amazon and the trees being cut down. They might put in a monocrop plantation. They might put in palm trees when they cut all of the natural forests down. That is not the same thing as leaving it there in the first place. And I can tell you firsthand that my sisters from South America know and understand the desecration and consequences that happen when they stand up and fight. My sister Gloria is on a watch list for endangered people. Gloria Oshugwa, you can look her up, is on a watch list of endangered people for fighting against oil industries that predominantly come from Canada and the United States, and that go into her territories in the Amazon. In Australia, they're dealing with the same thing when it comes to fracking. Their people are being lied to. Their people are being told that this is good for them by industries from the United States and Canada. My sisters can tell you that they were told, don't worry about it. There's not going to be much harm that's caused to you. Same is happening in Germany, where we went to a coal plant that is so huge. I couldn't even believe my eyes, the desecration of the earth. And so that's why we bring our children and our youth with us to stand up, to keep fossil fuels in the ground, even if we have to go in front of a man cap and get cussed out as a result. We bring our allies from around the country and sometimes around the world to stand with us, to say no more. Because we are all in the struggle together, whether we're from the United States or whether we're from Africa or South America or other parts of the world that are dealing with the fossil fuel industry. We have our own water blessing and healing walks at home. Well, prior to COVID, we weren't able to do one this last year, but we do want to be able to continue to pray over the land. We'll go to DC, Washington, DC, and we'll fight as much as we have to there. We'll put our teepees on their doorsteps to remind them that even though United States population of Indigenous peoples makes up less than 2%, we are still here. We are still fighting for a just transition away from the fossil fuel industry. At Haskell Indian Nations University in Lawrence, Kansas, we are integrating a just transition program into the colleges and university. And we hope to do that across the United States so that my daughter, my little Ayana, can be in an earth lodge, our traditional homes, like I showed you at the beginning, so that we can have solar power, small scale distributed solar power in our communities, so that we can have a solar farm like this one that sits just 3 miles away from the Dakota Access Pipeline. And I'm sure you didn't hear about it. Didn't make the mainstream media because Cannonball is fighting for renewable energy. And so that our native renewables and other native companies can be lifted up in a government that tries to see otherwise. We try to feed ourselves so we can truly be sovereign, whether that be small scale gardening like this here or large scale gardening like I just showed you. These are steps we can take as individuals to join this fight against the climate crisis. You can join us in looking at our Indigenous Principles of Just Transition. This booklet can be downloaded at www.ienearth.org, and it has a list of our principles of just transition and how they can be used in your community, as well as this beautiful poster that it folds out to in the middle that was made by our sister Jackie Fawn. We do these things for the next 7 generations, because if we don't, nobody else will. When we're talking about our kids, like my 2 littles here, Ayana and Winter Eagle, we can't compromise. They don't have a voice to speak on their behalf right now. We have to hold our governments accountable. Even if our government now is better than the last government, we can't become complacent and better. There has to be a best way to deal with the climate crisis. So we keep pushing them and holding them accountable to those that cannot speak for themselves. As Kelly said in the beginning, the 4-legged, the winged, the fish, all those that swim in the oceans that also don't have a voice. We have to be their voice. Matsikirats, audio agats. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Candy. The destruction that you described is unimaginable. I think we all live and confront the climate crisis in different ways, but your presentation has really reminded us all of how connected everything is. We can't talk about saving planet Earth without talking first about humanity and without talking first about the rights of Indigenous people to sovereignty and self-determination. We also have to make sure that we are also tonight exploring what I think is important about what climate justice looks like, in the sense of what is system change and not climate change? What does that mean to all of us, and how do we work together to build for that? I'm really honored that you were able to join us, and also grateful, I will say, to the translators as well, who have made this possible to be in both English and Spanish. They have donated some of their time to Anna and to Mercedes. Thank you. I'm sure I will thank you again. I also wanted to make sure to say that if you haven't joined the translation, we are moving into our first speaker, who will be in Spanish. So if you're in the main part of the webinar, you are listening right now in English. You should, to me, speak in English, but when Viviana starts talking, you'll want to navigate to the bottom of your screen to the globe to choose English, to mute the original audio, and you will hear the translation of our sister Viviana. Our next speaker is Viviana Moreno. She is an organizer with the Grassroots Assembly of Neighbors, No to the Esquiel Mine, which is part of the Union of Assemblies of Chubut Communities. They organize against multiple mining projects in the Patagonia region of Argentina, the southern part of South America. Many of these companies are owned by Canadian-based mining companies, including Pan American Silver and Equinox Gold. And the town of Esquiel was successful in 2003 in stopping the development of a mine owned by Meridian Gold, a Canadian company. Viviana is a biochemist with 32 years of work in public health, and it is an honor to have you here today to share your experience, and also just to recognize that for Viviana, it is after 11 p.m. at night. So we are especially grateful that you're able to join us here live tonight and build this climate justice movement across borders. Viviana does have photos and a video she wants to share, so I'll get that queued up. But please join me in welcoming Viviana Moreno.
Bueno, un enorme gusto estar
It's a pleasure for me to participate here in this meeting. I think the only way of salving the planet is like this, building networks between all of those of us, and there are many of us, who see the need to prioritize the care for the planet. It's a common home, our Mapu, as the Mapuche people who inhabit these lands say. And to share with you that for 35 years ago, I decided to live in Esquel. Esquel is a small city in the Patagonia in Argentina. It's the southernmost region of the country, and this province that I live in is the province of Chubut. Esquel is a small community with 40,000 inhabitants, and this small community is surrounded by natural wonders. We have the purest water you can find, and in general, people have lived for a very long time from the possibilities that the land allowed. Just like what we heard from Candy and what Kelly shared, America was, during the conquest, scavenged, and the south of America, this was a terrible genocide and destruction, specifically in the Argentinian Patagonia. The Argentinian government, at a certain time, did what's called the campaign of the desert, a genocide where thousands died. These were lands inhabited by original indigenous people, Mapuches and Tehuelches, who were inhabitants of both Argentina as well as Chile. In 2001, now Argentina is a very rich country with huge natural resources and human resources. Beautiful people here live here who dream of a better life. But we've had different governments with different political alignments that periodically drove the country to very difficult economic crisis, difficult to overcome. One of the last ones, the most difficult ones, was in the year 2001. At the time, the most difficult point to solve was the issue of unemployment. And in this context, in this small city, which at the time had 17,000 inhabitants, there's the discovery of gold and silver, and the Viridian Gold, the Canadian company, shares in the media that they would start with the mining exploitation in this location, and having, in a way, forgot, let's say, what happened in America and what was done for 500 years here. What happened with this thing, this fact that we exported nature, is that these territories were devastated, and the bodies of the people who inhabited territories were devastated as well. So at the time, we first saw with the good eyes the fact that this mining company would come, because we believed the company's slogan, which claimed they would bring employment and development. That was basically what this company was saying. What actually happened is that this discovery, gold and silver, was done through a tool. What happened then was education. At a certain time, this company, Meridian Gold, they invite a manager of a company to participate in a conference together with several representatives or institutions with the manager of the DuPont company. And this person would explain the use of cyanide for gold extraction. And in this conference, we had the presence of two professors of chemistry in the university from the University of Patagonia. And for the first time, it was understood that this new mining, this modern mining, this, let's say, this 21st century mining, or of the end of last century, that started using this kind of metal, where concentrations that are so low that it's just a few grams of gold or silver per tons of rocks. And they realized that the only way of doing this was through chemical extraction with chemical compounds such as cyanide. And when they left this conference, they asked themselves two questions. First, what do you mean that cyanide will be used to extract gold? And how is gold extracted in this way? And the other question they ask themselves is, are we supposed to go home right now, or should we alert the population that this will devastate their land and the contamination risks involved in this kind of mining? They then start researching this, and they do the most that one can do to protect the environment. They took science to the streets using what we call popular education. So they shared in a very basic class so that every single neighbor could understand it. They started explaining this in every TV program available in schools, in institutions, through the media. They started explaining what was the risk with this gold mine that was just 6 kilometers away from the center of Esquel. That was the location of the mining project. Now, immediately, as soon as people became aware that what was at stake here was water, we had two risks. On the one hand, competition for water, which is there's very little water. This is a semi-arid area, especially right now. For example, we are in summer and there's scarcity of water sometimes. So we have then scarcity, but not only that, also contamination. Now, this mine was located very few meters away from one of the lakes that are part of the water reserves of the area. So then people started organizing themselves under the form of assemblies. In a school, we had a first meeting with 60 neighbors, and 1 week later, there were 600 in a community of 17,000 inhabitants. And that's how many of us learned. Many of us had during our teenage years or in our early university years, we had governments that were dictatorial governments. That's why we didn't know how to work or to communicate in this way, how to find agreements so that people could start sharing these ideas and start listening to one another horizontally and thinking that no opinion is more important than another. And through these methods, we started fighting a different voice, a voice like the one Kelly mentioned, and that has to do essentially with the voice of the indigenous people and this conception of setting aside this human-centered view of the world as if the world were laid at man's feet, and start living and with a different conception, understanding ourselves as part of nature, and we need to live in harmony with nature. And anything that damages nature and that damages the environment damages also ourselves. And in this varied mixture of neighbors, we found a lot of capacities. And in an act of generosity and working towards a common good, such as defending water, everyone put the best of themselves to work. And then musicians came on, artists, plastic artists started joining. We had actors, technicians, lawyers, chemists, economists, everyone started giving of themselves and working together. And there's there's not that much time here, but we had only 2 months until the environmental impact study would be published. December 4 of 2002, there would be a public audience to share the results. And January 4 of 2003, Meridian Gold Company would begin building the plant for the mining extraction. So then, very quickly, we started doing awareness raising work. We produced booklets that we shared home by home in each one of the homes of our neighbors, and we started sharing information so quickly and with such intensity that in the end we forced our legislative power, the local legislative power, the council of the city, to organize a plebiscite. It would be the second plebiscite in the history of Latin America in which the people would choose themselves if they wanted this type of mining exploitation or not. In this plebiscite, this referendum that took place March 23rd of 2003, 85% of the neighbors said no to the mining project of Esquel. Since it wasn't binding, it was just the beginning of the struggle that we are in. We were never able to completely cancel the project. We started looking for all of the alternatives that we have, using all of the tools at our disposal to see how we could stop this. One of the things that we did was to present a young woman. She was 21 years old, and the only thing she had in her name was a bicycle. And she presented a project of defending the environment. And we started mobilizing people to take the streets. And this is what you're seeing right now. The pictures that you're seeing, these are the rallies and demonstrations that we organized since December 4th, 2002. The people in Esquel take the streets to march against the mining project, and this has never stopped. The marches have been so large, they've had even 6,000 people, and they have never stopped, not with the pandemic, but also not with the snow and the cold. People take to the streets showing this lack of care for society. And we also started using different tools. We started having, for example, we built a website which also allowed us to share more information on this case worldwide. In different Spanish-speaking countries, they read our articles. We constantly share updates on and information on mining, on this kind of mining. And this continued on to such a degree that in the year 2003, the province of Chubut, the government of the province, passed a law, the first law in Argentina against mining. They forbid this large-scale mining using cyanide. But that was never enough, because what we learned is that the metal in the mountain doesn't deteriorate, and neither does the greed of the governments and the companies. And that's why our greatest tool was to always stay alert, We never gave up. We never stopped researching and sharing information. And for the last 18 years, without pause, we have continued fighting against this and spreading this methodology of work as well, with assemblies that are now present in every single town in Chubut. In the province of Chubut, each single town has assemblies where they spread information on mining. Right now, the provincial government and the national government and Pan American Silver, that's also a Canadian company that wants to enter the central and north part of the Chubut area. They are trying to weaken the resolve of the people to start large scale mining. And people are fighting against this, both with legal resources, using also the Constitution. We've presented 2 law projects to expand the environmental protection, and we keep resisting to avoid large scale mining and prevent it, to stop it from coming into the province of Chubut. And what we learn with all of this is that this struggle goes hand in hand with all of the different kinds of environmental struggle, with all of the different types of extractivism against fracking, against monoculture. Soy monoculture has harmed our country so much, with also the defense of water and glaciers, fighting against toxic agrochemicals, against the construction of dams. This has also to do with the defense of human rights and the territories where the indigenous people live, because actually these peoples that in that famous desert campaign were massacred, and the few that were left in very, very dry areas. But what they didn't know is that underground there were amazing mineral resources. There are silver mines in Chubut, uranium mines even, and all of the companies and all of the governments have tried to silence our voices, to paralyze us and oppress us, and to lead us towards a crisis so that we give up in our resistance. This is the only way that they'd be able to make any kind of progress with their project. What we believe in and what we are working on for many years already, we keep building more and more networks. For instance, we have created a plurinational Latin American union of water for the peoples. Water should be for the peoples and not for mining companies, not for dams, not for fracking. So we keep building different types of networks that allow us, as I said at the beginning, these networks allowed us to defend Mother Earth and to resist as well consumerism. The planet cannot stand this level of consumption. So trying to also modify our individual behaviors so that we can start needing less and less minerals, and less of these kinds of tools that, as it happens right now, they are devastating our planet. So I think what happened during the pandemic, what we realized is that what we need is food, healthy food, and affection. Those are the things that we need. And many of those things that consumerism made us think was essential, we realize now that we can live without. So I want to thank you for this invitation. I believe we need to keep on working together, connected worldwide, because the planet is full of people that think just like us. Thank you very much.
Woohoo!
Thank you very much, Viviana, for your presentation today. I think we often discuss in Climate Convergence the importance of consistent and continuous campaigning for our Mother Earth. and the people of Chubut and of Esquiel and the self-organized communities against the mines is an example of that. For 18 years, you have been in constant mobilization against mines, and it is our responsibility as people in the United States or Canada to make sure that part of our climate justice work is talking about the devastation on the planet caused by companies that are based in the United States and Canada. This also includes the devastation caused by wars and occupations and by the actions of governments like the US and Canada that cause forced migrations from around the world, but especially from South and Latin America. This is part of our work, and it is part of our responsibility as climate justice organizers to recognize that. The devastation caused in Argentina impacts the planet the same way as devastation caused within the borders of Canada, and we have to fight them both equally. So next, I'm gonna get ready to show some greetings that we have received from an organizer who lived with us here in Vancouver for a few years. Her name is Sophia Rodriguez. She is a German-Peruvian translator, an artist, a visual effects lighter, and an activist who led the local volunteer group in Vancouver for Greenpeace a few years and organized with Pull Together and other organizations and groups. She is now living in Berlin, Germany, and involved in climate activism there with Parents for Future and other initiatives. As I started out saying, it is very strange hour of the night for her. So Sophia prepared for us an excellent video to describe the situation in Germany and the ways that we can continue to work together. So I'll go ahead and start that now. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sophia. Some of you know me from when I used to lead the local volunteer group for Greenpeace. I'm now living in Germany, and Thomas asked me to give you guys a brief description of what's going on with climate activism in Germany. So, like everywhere, climate activists are feeling a sense of urgency and are energized by the fact that the next 10 years are decisive. And in Germany this year, there's a big election coming, which will be very decisive also. Issue in the zeitgeist is bigger almost than it ever was, except for just before COVID. So a lot of people are aware of it. Even the most conservative parties have to talk about it. But the measures taken are not in proportion to the urgency, the actual real urgency, and what the scientists are saying, just like pretty much everywhere in the world. The big issues in Germany are, on the one hand, also fossil fuels, like in Canada, but here we don't have oil or such. We have coal, and there is a lot of use of gas. There's not a lot of gas here, but we import a lot of gas. The government has decided to exit coal by 2038, which is too late for if we're going to stay below 1.5 or even 2 centigrades warming. Germany still uses quite a bit of coal to generate electricity, and the government hasn't been willing to change that quickly. They even adjust the laws for renewable energies to slow them down in order to still give coal companies space to operate. This is probably because of relationships that the government has with the companies, also because of contracts that have been fixed for years, and there would need to be paid a lot of penalties for rescinding on those contracts with the coal mines. But basically the main issue is that the main actors aren't really grappling with the urgency and the tremendity of the problem. So there's a lot of attempts from climate scientists and activists and advocates to try and end coal faster, and there's a lot of blocking of coal mines and talking to politicians and all that kind of thing. I'll talk about the different groups in a bit. Then there's gas. Germany uses a lot of gas for heating, and we also have a lot of very old big buildings that are hard to heat and aren't very well isolated. The big transformation that needs to happen there with isolating of homes and changing to other sources of warmth is not happening nearly fast enough. There is a big fight right now about a pipeline coming from Russia called the Nord Stream 2 that some people want to build to import gas from Russia, and which obviously climate activists and scientists are against, because again, like other pipelines in Canada, it just means you're building the infrastructure, so you're investing, and it'll force you to stay with that source for long. There was recently a law package passed by the government for renewable energies that a lot of people took issue with because it wasn't really taking into account the urgent need to build up renewables. It was just building them up very slowly. And this is a shame because 10 years ago or 15 years ago, Germany was a forerunner for renewable energies, and a lot of people were installing solar on their roofs. Now that it's a lot cheaper, the government is stopping it because it doesn't want it to overtake coal just that quickly. Another big thing here is the auto industry. It's very powerful, and this means a few things. For example, the government hasn't yet, and the industry hasn't yet, put a date to when gasoline and diesel cars will no longer be produced. Even if the electric car market is growing, this is going too slowly, and there's no plan for exactly when electric cars will be the only ones produced. And for example, even Volkswagen, which has announced that they are no longer building gasoline or diesel cars in Germany, has opened a plan to still build those cars in Eastern Europe, and is putting on the nice face in Germany that they're only building electric. Of that kind of greenwashing tricks going on. Also, a tragic development is that in recent years, SUVs have become a bit more popular here. That didn't used to be the case, which is kind of the opposite direction of where we need to be going. And a lot of activists go to the auto shows and protest against this. And there is a special bit of hatred in their heart reserved for SUVs. There's a lot of graffiti you see around saying "fuck SUVs" and things like that. Another big fight that is also related to the auto industry is the building of new motorways, freeways, called Autobahn here. Maybe you know it from Kraftwerk. So just recently there was a big showdown in a forest that is being logged to build a new Autobahn. And many activists were camping and building houses in the trees for months and trying to stop the logging of the forest for the Autobahn. And there was a big showdown with hundreds of police where the occupiers were finally evicted. And it was particularly hard to bear for the climate movement because the government in that region is a coalition that includes the Green Party. And the Green Party had in their coalition contract promised to just build this Autobahn, and they said they couldn't do anything against it. And seems to be playing with the idea of forming a coalition with the center-right government, which would make it difficult to have any really ambitious plans in terms of climate protection. So one of the big demands of the climate movement is that the government and the industry set an early date to leave behind gasoline and diesel cars and to stop using coal much sooner than 2038. Coal plants are not only staying online for long in the current plan, there are even some new ones being built, and there's even some villages being destroyed and erased from the face of the earth to dig for coal under them. Another thing that's happening is there's a lot of talk and discussion around hydrogen. Hydrogen is being lauded by the government and a few people as the big solution to everything and the silver bullet for climate. But really the fact is hydrogen can only be produced already have energy, and that energy, the gray or blue hydrogen, is produced from fossil fuels or gas, and is not a silver bullet because you need to have an excess of renewably made energy in order to convert it to hydrogen and then use it, for example, in a car or for industry. And no country has an excess of renewables yet. Most countries have some percentage of renewables in what they're using, but we need to first get to 100% renewables, and then if we have too much, we can make hydrogen. There's even some misunderstanding what some people say, I'm not going to get an electric car because I'm waiting for the hydrogen car. And also using hydrogen to power, for example, a car is many times more expensive than using gasoline, diesel, or electricity in a battery. So people are calling hydrogen the champagne of energy. So it's like, yeah, you can take a bath in champagne, but you could also just use water. So what many people are saying is that the government is using this hydrogen hype to kind of distract from their failure in actually building up renewable energies and implementing policy to really protect the climate. In terms of the climate movement, there are many, many different groups, but some of the main ones are Fridays for Future, which are huge here, and many related groups that also have the for future in the name, like Parents for Future, which I'm a part of, Berlin for Future, which is a local one here in Berlin, Scientists for Future, who are very important, Psychologists for Future, Filmmakers for Future. There's just many for future groups, and currently there's an attempt to integrate them better and make them work together. There's also the international environmental NGOs that you know, like Greenpeace and 350, and some big older German ones. And then maybe you've seen pictures of Ende Gelände. They are a very large group of activists that occupy and block fossil fuel infrastructure and other things. They're all dressed in white. You've maybe seen some of the pictures. They're always very impressive. I've just recently, this week, started a job at an organization called German Zero that are doing very interesting work. On the one hand, they have a team of scientists and policy experts building very detailed proposals for the laws and measures that would need to be implemented by the government to stay below 1.5, which is something that the government hasn't done, so not someone needs to do it. What we're also doing is supporting groups in a growing number of cities who are putting together a citizens' proposal, which if they have more than 5% of the population's signatures, which is challenging because they can't be online, they have to be signatures in person, which is hard right now. But if they do get there, and a few cities have already, legally the city has to look into it and either implement the proposal or do a referendum on it. So the proposals are all around being CO2 neutral by 2030, the city. So this is something we're working on that is very promising and difficult, but it's a concrete thing that you can do. I'm not sure if a law like this exists in Canada. I imagine if it did, someone would be doing this. The last thing I want to mention is that there is an interesting connection between Germany and Canada in that the big public bank here that does loans and financing of projects mostly outside Germany and sometimes to help developing countries, but also sometimes with good ecological investments, but they're a very mixed bag. They also have some terrible investments. And for example, they are one of the ones financing the LNG pipeline in Canada. So that would be an interesting cooperation if anyone's interested. And finally, I want to thank you for listening to me ramble on, and I send you a hug over the Atlantic, and keep up the good work. Bye-bye. Hey, I just wanted to add half a minute to my video because I just read something and I thought it was a really good take on this time. It's the end of so many eras. It's the end of 16 years of Angela Merkel in Germany. It's the end of around 200 years of fossil fuel dominance, and it's sort of the end of 500 years of total dominance of the Western countries and how that interplays with the fossil fuel world. And it's very scary and it's very exciting, and we don't know yet what's coming, but we're all part of the transition team in these changes. So we'll try to envision a good future and strive towards that everywhere.
Hello again, everyone. So that was Sophia Rodriguez from Germany. We have one more video from Cuba, and then our final speaker, Thomas Davies, before we go into question and answer tonight. Thank you again for joining us, and also another thank you to our translators, Anna and Mercedes, for your very hard work tonight. The next speaker, who also has sent us a video, because the United States economic and financial and commercial blockade on Cuba doesn't allow Zoom to work in Cuba, is a biologist, ornithologist, which is a bird specialist, and ecologist with the Cuban Ministry of Science, Technology, and the Environment, and an organization called BioEco, the Eastern Center for Ecosystems and Important Areas, BioEco works to increase knowledge of biological diversity with a focus on the most important areas, species, and populations of Eastern Cuba and the Caribbean. Now, we wanted to share this video from Cuba, and we asked for assistance to find a speaker from David Aldama Pando at the Cuban Embassy to Canada in Ottawa, because this shows another example of the fight against climate change and the fight for climate justice. An example of what can happen when the government of the country itself has really joined this fight. And so it will be very different from anything else we've seen, and also very important. Cuba, among other contribution that is made to the struggle against climate justice, was also in 2006 declared the only sustainable country in the world by the World Wildlife Federation. So I'll go ahead and queue up our last video before we welcome Climate Convergence organizer Thomas Davies to our virtual stage.
Hello everyone, thank you so much for inviting me to give this lecture on behalf of my country to this event. This presentation is about how Cuba is dealing with climate change at national and regional scales, including impacts and actions carried out during the last years and up to 2030. Cuban scientists have estimated the future climate scenarios for the country and the greater Caribbean region up to the year 2100, when the world reaches between 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius increase in temperatures. Those estimates have made it possible to characterize Cuba's future climate, focusing calculations on year 2030, 2050, and 2070. Among the impacts expected for Cuba are an increase in almost 1 Celsius degree in the average temperature, cloud cover decrease and solar radiation increase, increase of prolonged droughts and rainfall during the dry season, rise of the sea surface, permanent loss of the country's submerged surface that could reach up to 2.3% by the year 2050, as well as sea intrusion, especially at coastal areas. So for the future, it can safely be said that the Cuban climate is shifting from humid tropical to dry tropical, with average temperatures above 30 degrees Celsius, approximately 1,000 millimeters of annual average rainfall, and 70 rainy days, conditions that would bring about the displacement of dry landscapes typical of the eastern region to other areas of the country. The state plan to address climate change in the Republic of Cuba also known as Tarea Vida or Project Life in English, was adopted by the government in April 2017 to respond to its national goals and international commitments. It is a comprehensive and ambitious program to address climate change in the Cuban national territory through adaptation and mitigation measures. This state plan has 5 different strategic actions. The first one has to do with constructions in coastal zone. The second strategic action have to do with constructive typology. The third and the fourth strategic actions have to do with agricultural activities. And the fifth strategic action have to do with urban coastal rearrangement. These 5 strategic actions have 11 tasks dealing with priority areas, legal norms, beaches, water, forest, coral reef, physical territorial planning based on science, adaptation and mitigation measures, surveillance and early warning monitoring, perception and cultures, as well as international financing. The main objective of Tarea Vida or Project Life is to protect human life and its quality in a changing climate. To that end, it involves all the sectors of the economy and the society and is implemented at national and local levels. The 3-year term since the beginning of its implementation confirms that the plan is on the right track to achieve a resilient development with lower emissions. Its implementation is supported by the guidelines of the National Economic and Social Development Plan up to 2030, which provides that the state shall promote the implementation of a series of programs and actions to ensure the effective management of the country's disaster risk and climate change adaptation, energy efficiency, and the development of renewable energy sources. Likewise, it includes climate change mitigation and the promotion of a less carbon-intensive economic development within its objective. These national policy instruments support Cuba's contribution to 2030 agenda. Worth mentioning that the new Constitution of the Republic of Cuba adopted in 2019 include the climate change issue, specifically in the Article 16F. Moving into the advances Cuba has made in adaptation and mitigation actions, specifically those related with resilience, adaptation, and nature-based solutions. Urban planning is conceived as a system that goes from the national to municipal level, and environmental accounting has been adopted, which provides a procedure to recognize and record environmental expenses in order to assess climate change impacts and the results of Project Life. The implementation of ecosystem-based adaptation approach is targeting rehabilitation of coastal wetlands such as mangroves, marshlands, and grasslands, and marine ecosystems like seagrass and coral reef. A permanent beach recovery investment program has been designed, and this experience has already been shared with other countries of the region. Priority actions include soil use planning and preservation, diversification of crops, growing crops varieties adapted to changing climate conditions, and the use of technologies to increase irrigation and water supply efficiency. The state plan to address climate change widens the scope of mitigation to other sectors. These include the implementation of photovoltaic solar energy systems, bioelectric plants, wind farms, and hydroelectric plants, programs that will generate over 7,000 gigawatts annually and will prevent the emission of over 6 million tons of CO2 to the atmosphere. Among the achievements are the publication of the first National Bioenergy Atlas, the implementation of 18,000 biodigesters up to 2030 to generate 40 megawatts daily, and the implementation of rice husk gasification technology and its connection to the national grid. Pilot transportation development measures are being promoted to facilitate transition toward a low-carbon urban transportation system in the capital, such as public bicycle sharing system and hybrid and electric transportation. Every year, Cuban forests help to remove 20 million tons of CO2 from the atmosphere. A pilot project is being implemented to establish payment for this environmental service through sustainable forest management, with potential to scale it up nationwide. At the sectorial level, more cost-effective measures are being explored, including the reduction of emissions through sustainable management of soils and better agricultural practices. So, what's Cuba doing to fight climate change regionally? Cuban researchers, in collaboration with CARICOM and Climate Change Center and the University of the West Indies, have estimated the future of climate scenario for the country and the greater Caribbean region up to the year 2100. To launch and consolidate the Caribbean Biological Corridor Initiative, together with Haiti, Dominican Republic, and Puerto Rico, and Martinica, which is a framework to foster sustainable use of natural resources as a way to reduce pressure to biodiversity, improving living conditions in key conservation areas, to foster long-term monitoring of biodiversity as a way to detect the effects of climate change. Some migratory birds, like the black-throated blue warbler of the picture, already detected with declining trends in Cuba, reflecting long-term trends previously detected in North America. To identify key biodiversity areas relevant for conservation, both in marine and terrestrial ecosystems, and to find gaps in conservation and connectivity, and to restore those habitats located mainly along watersheds, especially where rainforests and pine forests were timbered in the insular Caribbean. And that's it. Thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about what Cuba and the CBC are doing to fight climate change in one of the most imperiled regions of the world.
So thank you again, although he's not here with us tonight, to Dr. Freddy Rodriguez Santana from Santiago de Cuba in Eastern Cuba, and with the Cuban Ministry of Science, Technology, and the Environment. I now would like to introduce Thomas Davies. Thomas Davies is a founding member of Climate Convergence, a unionized pipe fitter and power engineer, and author of System Change, Not Climate Change, Battle of Ideas Press 2019. It is also Thomas's tough job to tie everything together tonight and to lead us into question and answer. This is a copy of Thomas's book, at which I'll post the link in the chat for how you can order. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us here tonight again. And I hand the floor over to Thomas.
Hi, everybody. Is my audio working correctly on the translation and everything?
Yeah.
Okay, good. And I was reminded to speak slowly for the translators. And I wanted to take the chance to thank them, because that's a very difficult job, but I think it's really important that we're doing our best to make this event as accessible as possible for people around the world in more than one language. I also really wanted to thank the other speakers who joined us. I think each and every one of them has something that they brought, and kind of helps show us how large the challenges we face are, but how connected and how powerful, and how diverse the ways that we're fighting for the same things is. I wanted to thank Kelly for opening the event in a good way. I've had the pleasure of going with her to and from some events and getting lost because I was listening to her stories about fighting for Indigenous rights and climate justice for decades. And when we have that kind of leadership that is kind of fostering young people, it's something that's so special, and that I've counted on a lot in my life. And getting in touch with Candy from the Indigenous Environmental Network, who I knew had been part of the fight for Standing Rock, was also really important. And I think that perspective is something that I'll talk a bit about more later, but is really inspiring. Viviana, I'd never met, and to be honest, I knew very little about the struggle in Argentina about mining. But since we started following your group's Instagram page in the last month, I've just been so impressed with daily how much is going on, how broad that struggle is, how consistent it is, how active, how rooted in the community it is. You see, even during COVID, they're finding ways, families and community fighting against the mine. And it's been something that I've been really impressed with over the last month. I think the last presentation from Cuba was a bit more nuts and bolts, but wouldn't it be so exciting to be working on the nuts and bolts instead of working on the changing the evil government part? We spend so much time and so much energy addressing our governments that are not taking this climate crisis seriously. And to be in a point where we're talking about mangrove forests and management, and have the power of the state, have the institutions that are really able to put these into effect, not working against us, but working for us. I think being involved in those kind of more nuts and bolts discussions would be really welcome. And I look forward to the point when poor and working people in Canada are part of those discussions. And Sophia, who's not with us because it's like 2 a.m. in Germany, but she played such a big role in Vancouver in organizing the meetings of groups that would support the Fridays for Future, support the young people who organized the largest rally in the history of Vancouver. And so I was really happy that she was able to participate and bring that, because I knew, and I think we all know who've been organizing in Vancouver, how important she was when she was with us. I had a bit of a hard time trying to figure out exactly what I wanted to say here tonight, because I think it's a very important time, and I didn't want to mess it up. And I also knew that there were speakers that definitely weren't gonna mess up what they were saying and had a lot of experience and a lot of perspective. So I kept coming back to kind of some main reference points for me that really shaped the way that I understand the work that we're doing, the work that we have been doing, and the work that we need to do. And those two instances, or two things that I participated in, or that I come back to in my own experience, were my first time attending rallies, which were against the invasion of Iraq. And at that point, those were the largest mobilizations in human history. And in Vancouver, I think my second march was 40,000 people. And we were in the big square around the art gallery, and if you know that square on the Georgia Street side, you know it's quite large, and people were complaining that we need to find a bigger place to have our rallies because we can't fit in everybody anymore. And so from the very beginning of my time as an organizer, I never doubted that mass mobilization was possible, and that mass mobilization and people coming together was not just possible like in other countries or other places, but was possible in Canada as well. And that's been really important because it hasn't always been easy to mobilize people for a variety of social justice causes for a variety of reasons. But we're able to do that. And that power that I felt and tens of thousands of other people felt is something that has stayed with many of us and has really kind of reinforced my belief that change is possible, and the belief that humans can come together to make changes. The second experience that I think really affected how I understand what we're doing is traveling to Standing Rock to witness what was going on there. And I was not a main organizer. I was not there for a very, very long time, but I was there reporting. And in the short time I was able to spend there, I was just so impressed. And Candy wasn't joking when she was saying North Dakota is not a state of large cities. And where that camp was in the middle of nowhere. Just driving through just these wide open spaces to get there, and then arriving and seeing literally thousands of people camped. And it was so well organized. There was security that met you when you came. There was water, there was toilets, there was a kitchen that never stopped. There was programming that never stopped. There was flags from so many Indigenous nations and so many other nations that had come to support and stand in solidarity with the struggle there. And seeing how that was possible and seeing how that was functioning really left a big impression on me. And also seeing in that process how non-Indigenous people were supporting struggle for Indigenous rights, and finding and trying to make the balance and the cohesion in the fight for Indigenous rights and climate justice, and really inspiring a generation of Indigenous and non-Indigenous organizers that are still making impacts today. And that's something that we see through Candy's work, and that's something that we see through the fight to stop the Keystone XL pipeline, and that continues today in the fight to stop the Line 3 pipeline. So I keep coming back to those experiences, and I wanted to emphasize those because I think people should come back to and think about their own, and also to know that these were experiences that in the end we didn't stop the war on Iraq. And the Dakota Access Pipeline at that time was built, and for a time has had fracked gas flowing through it. But they were important in building a movement, and they have effects that are still important today. And they were part of building towards, I think, where we're going. Unfortunately, the stakes are getting higher and higher every day. But I just want part of my perspective and part of the perspective I want to talk about for 2020 is that it's not just one struggle, it's not just one thing, it's not just if we win this then it's over, or if we lose this it's over. This is, and we see that from Viviana's work for decades, this is a long-term struggle, and there's going to be ups and there's going to be downs, and there's going to be extremely strange years like 2020, where you go from being mobilized on the streets in thousands pretty constantly to being connected by computers and being limited in how you can meet, but still finding ways to struggle. So that perspective, that long view of history that actually Allison spoke about a couple of webinars ago, I think is really going to help us not to be discouraged, and we're fighting, and not to be desperate. We're fighting for our lives, but we know that we need to keep getting up day in, day out and doing the work. I wanted to read a couple quotes that, and I guess you can guess where they're from. One of the biggest issues is you cannot self-isolate from climate. That is not an option. We cannot retreat in and wait out climate change. It will just get worse. The United States and the world, and that's one quote, and then the next is another excerpt. The United States and the world face a profound climate crisis. We have a narrow moment to pursue action at home and abroad in order to avoid the most catastrophic impacts of that crisis and seize the opportunity that tackling climate change presents. Climate change is the biggest threat to our planet. I want to work alongside others both to amplify known ways and to explore new ways of fighting the devastating impact of climate change on this planet we all share. And those could have been quotes from this webinar, but they are quotes from Mark Carney, who's the head of the Bank of England, from Joe Biden's, the second one's from Joe Biden's executive order on climate change. And the third is from our friend Jeff Bezos, announcing he's going to be doing some climate donations. And I think we need, in 2020, we really saw that we need to be very careful to judge people by their actions, not by their words, especially these big capitalist politicians and CEOs, because they are our language and our movements and what we are fighting for has become more mainstream, so big that they cannot ignore it, which is a gain. But they are very, very sneaky and very, very good at using our own language to try and co-opt our movements. So we can't rely, even though it's exciting sometimes to read that and to think maybe they'll do this heavy lifting for us, but they have not, they will not. We cannot give up the grassroots organizations and mobilizations and infrastructure that we've been building to hope that these people are just going to swoop in and fix this crisis they've been sitting on and creating and fermenting for decades. We need to keep pushing them and keep holding them accountable. And the best kind of example I have, or historical likeness that I could think about, was during the Vietnam anti-war movement. When Lyndon Baines Johnson ran as a peace candidate while bombing Vietnam, Richard Nixon ran on ending the war in Vietnam the first time, and then doubled down and promised to be the president that ended the war in Vietnam when he was reelected. While he was promising to be the peace candidate and end the war in Vietnam, he was dropping the most amount of bombs on Vietnam and Southeast Asia at any time during the war. And what they were doing is, leading up into these peace negotiations that they would drop more and more bombs to try and get in a better position. And for them, peace in Vietnam meant domination in Vietnam and peace under the barrel of their guns and their bombs and their control. Whereas that is a very different definition of what peace for people in Vietnam and the anti-war movement in Vietnam was. And I see that same kind of rush to build as many infrastructure projects as possible, as many pipelines, as many mines, as many ways to tie us into the old ways that have gotten into this crisis before we're able to stop it. That's why they're so concerted on TMX, on that pipeline, on pushing through the Site C Dam in British Columbia, even though it makes no sense. Line 3 in the United States, Dakota Access Pipeline. They're rushing because they know that we're chasing them. And part of their strategy is to just blitz and get as much built as quickly as possible and use our own language against us so that we think that they're taking our concerns seriously. So I'm not looking to Jeff Bezos for climate leadership. I'm encouraged that the Keystone XL pipeline was canceled after it had already been canceled and then resurrected and canceled and resurrected. But we need to keep pushing. We cannot be satisfied. And I come back to what Candy said. We want better, okay, but we want best. And it's not just because, why settle, but also because we can't survive without the best now. Better will not be enough to save humanity and to keep the temperature of the climate of this planet of a livable level. And I wanted to just say, they're really tricky. And just to add to my point that we're not trusting them on their climate policy is, billionaires in the United States increased their net worth over 1 trillion in the last year. And Jeff Bezos, who had just said that really nice thing about saving the environment, added 70 billion to his net worth. And he's now worth nearly 185 billion. And probably he went up a couple more billion since that was written. And he announced that he was going to donate $10 billion to address the climate crisis. And that sounds nice. And $10 billion is nothing to ignore. But when you just made 70 billion off of a crisis, and when you're worth already 185 billion, what's that 10 billion supposed to mean? And why should we be thanking you for it? And he's not giving that $10 billion without strings attached. They do that so that they get to control the narrative, they get to control the projects, they try and control the politics. There's no way Jeff Bezos is donating any of those $1 billion to Candy, to Climate Convergence, to Viviana, to Kelly's work, to real grassroots Indigenous work for climate justice. That's not what he wants to promote. the same as Elon Musk when he announces $100 million prize for carbon capture technology. And somebody tweeted like, congratulations to whoever invents trees. Because it's ridiculous that they try and present solving the climate crisis as some sort of innovation contest where the person who comes up with the best idea for technology is going to solve it. Humanity already has enough food, enough technology. This planet is so rich and so special that we need to continue developing the technology, but that's not the priority. It's part of the struggle, but it's not to innovate our way out of the climate crisis. We're not in a climate crisis because we haven't innovated our way out of it technologically. We're in a climate crisis because we're controlled by a system that prioritizes unlimited growth on a finite planet at the expense of the rest of poor and working people. I'm going to try and wrap it up here. Like I said, my plan was to speak really quickly because I had a lot of things I wanted to say, but then when I was reminded that I needed to speak slowly for the translators, my kind of strategy went out the window. One thing I wanted to address quickly is how we relate to workers, and specifically in Canada and around the world, how we relate to workers that are in fossil fuel industries. I'm a Red Seal pipe fitter. I worked a lot in refineries and chemical plants and in those kind of places. And some of my very good friends continue to work in those places. And seeing how they've reacted to this situation has been really educational for me. There's been some really big upheavals in these big projects that the government didn't shut down, and we had provincial health orders against large gatherings, and that would definitely preclude having 400 people crawling all over each other trying to build oil refinery extension. But they ignored to be able to keep the industry going. And to see them feel really unsafe and be really scared. And the debates that were going on back and forth between people who are saying like, we can't do this, and the ones saying like, this is our last big job. If we don't have this job, what are we gonna do? So I think we need to understand that fear is real, and that fear is used by oil corporations and is used by the governments of, in this case, the government of Canada, to try and promote their agenda. It would be very simple for the government of Canada to really guarantee the incomes of people, so that fear wasn't there and people were able to make rational choices and make choices based on the interests of humanity, make choices based on the interests of their community. It's not because they don't have the resources, it's because they refuse to put the resources there. And so we saw there in Alberta at the tar sands, more than 1,000 workers were infected since the pandemic began. There was 21 outbreaks, and that's just the ones that were reported. And Jill McGowan, the president of the Alberta Federation of Labor, argued that it's really impossible to track what's going on because the government is refusing to really track it seriously. And he said, as long as we continue to deny that COVID-19 is being spread very extensively in workplaces, we will not be able to get a handle on the second wave. I can tell you, based on the stories from our fellow unions, and the reported outbreaks are just the tip of the iceberg. And we saw that the Trans Mountain Pipeline have a couple of months shutdown, and they said that was to kind of recalibrate. One worker died, another was severely injured at the Burnaby tank farm. And then something that they didn't report very much in the news at all was that they shut down because they were told to shut down by a government inspector because they found widespread and systematic abuse of the COVID-19 protocols. So I think we need to, it's a difficult situation, but we need to remind workers that these corporations care as much about them as they do the planet. And they see them as the same way they see the planet, as something to be used and abused and exploited. And when they're no longer able to do that, then they no longer have any use for you. And it's something that we need to continue pushing on, continue making the argument. And as the conditions on the ground change, I think we'll have more and more space to work and more connections to make. And I say that because we can see some cracks recently. There was, when the Keystone XL pipeline was canceled, the Jason Kenney government of Alberta had invested at least $1.5 billion in the project, and had given billions more in loan guarantees, spent $1.1 million to lobby the government in Washington, and all that money was lost. And there was a lot of anger in Alberta against Jason Kenney and that conservative government for making that stupid bet and losing all that taxpayer money. And it was by people who had probably supported it, and because they'd been told that this was going to be the best thing. But you can see he made a bet, he lost money, there was anger, and those things are not so solid. And the Alberta government had also announced that it was getting rid of its 1976 coal mining policy, which basically had made coal mining impossible in the Rocky Mountains and some of the most amazing, beautiful, sensitive ecosystems in the province and Canada. And they announced that they were getting rid of that and they were going to be giving out permits for new coal mining. And they had to announce a month later that they were turning back on that. They were going to reinstate the 1976 mining policy. They were going to modernize it. So the fight isn't over, because whatever they mean by modernize is not something that's in the interests of nature. But they had to walk it back because of public outcry in the province of Alberta itself. It wasn't because there was this huge pressure from other parts of Canada. It was because people in Alberta who have been under the most pressure to support resource extraction, who are facing the most precarity because of the downfall of the fossil fuel industry, even they knew that this was going too far, that using these beautiful mountains for coal mining was a ridiculous idea. And so the government was forced to walk that back for now. So there is space, there is concern, there, even in places where we wouldn't normally think that there would be, there's room to maneuver. So I'm going to wrap it up with a couple last thoughts. The first is a quote. I had like encouraged Sophia to include photos, and then Candy asked me if she should use photos, and I said that's a great idea, they'll be really impactful, and they were. And Viviana had an amazing slideshow, and I didn't get any photos for mine, so that'll be next webinar. But I do have a quote from Albert Einstein that I think is really important. And he said, he said, a human being is part of the whole a human being is part of the whole called by us universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. This delusion is kind of a prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest to us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion, to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. And that's what we're doing, I think, and that's what we're trying to do with this kind of webinar, is make our circle bigger. And this year has been really challenging. TMX is at our doorsteps. You can see the trees they're threatening to cut down. You can see them ripping things apart on Burnaby Mountain. But you can see that community organizing is continuing. And you can see, and I think we need to learn from the lessons of Standing Rock, where that resistance started when that pipeline was nearly complete. and created a movement that had shockwaves and has created organizers and inspiration in the United States and around the world that continue to make a huge impact. And so by understanding that this struggle is international, by understanding that the crisis we face is international, and that we need to have a long-term vision of what we're doing, I think we can stay motivated. I think we can stay connected. And I think we can emphasize that we need to come together to build organizations, to rely on ourselves, to really confront the climate crisis. So I want to thank everybody for the time, and I'm really looking forward to the questions and comments.
Thank you very much, Thomas, for tying that all together. I really am grateful to all of the speakers and everyone that's joined us tonight, and also again to the translators who've been really working very hard to capture all of this in English and in Spanish. We do have some time for Q&A, and we've gotten a few questions. So we'll do about 10 minutes, and then we'll go ahead and do a wrap up tonight. So I also wanted to call attention to the chat. There's been some important links shared for how to find out more and get involved, as well as I posted about the next Climate Convergence meeting. For those of you that are in Vancouver or not, but want to join us, our next meeting is on February 17th at 7 p.m. And we're asking, we can send you the link for the Zoom. Just contact us on social media or post your email or get in touch, and we will be able to get in touch with you. Our website is just climateconvergence.ca, and the email is climateconvergence604@gmail.com. The first question is for Viviana. It says, Viviana, thank you for your presentation. I was wondering, what do you think as people in Canada or the United States we can do to help in the fight against the mining companies?
Bueno, gracias, ¿no? Gracias por el interés de colaborar.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your interest in helping and working with this. We've had contact with some organizations from Canada, and in particular, what they're trying to do is to join together all the towns that have problems, for example, all the peoples that have problems at this moment, for example, with Pan American Silver. They've put us all together, and as protests, they have done protests on certain events, like in certain mining conferences that take place in Toronto. They do protests at these conferences with signs and posters related to those particular places or towns where the mining projects are taking place. This is a way of visibilizing what is not being seen in Canada and what we're suffering and where these companies are working. And there is one thing that I would like to answer in relation to what Thomas was saying before, that we are moved by hope. In 18 years, we never lost hope that we can do it. In 2002, everybody said it's a done deal, and we didn't think that. We thought that it wasn't a done deal. We didn't believe it. Now every day they're saying that they're going to approve mining zoning so they can do mining work in the plateau. And we have hope. We know that we can resist. If we get together, if we stand up, we have it. But we have hope. If we lose a battle, we move forward, we continue. That, I think, is what drives our action. And in these demonstrations and these meetings, they're really important for us, where we get together. We are on social media as well. We research, we do publications, but what is the richest thing for us is physical proximity. What you were talking about before, where 40,000, a demonstration where there was the participation of 40,000 people, that happens to us. We feel the same thing in every protest, in every demonstration that we organize and we go to. It's an energy that is generated there. And many people say that that is because of love of earth, love for life, love for caring for each other, for everybody, the territory, and that energy gives us like a positive feedback, and we are enriched by that. After a protest, after a demonstration, we feel better than how we felt before. And I believe that that is the strength that revitalizes the struggle. But it's been 18 years, thousands of circumstances. We never lost hope. So that is why we continue working on this.
Thank you very much, Viviana, for answering that question. The next question is for Candy. It says, thanks to all speakers for their insightful talks. Can Candy please speak more about the fight against the Line 3 pipeline and how climate justice activists in Canada and the United States can come together against this pipeline? Of course, speaking too from the experience with the Dakota Access Pipeline that had many people visiting, I think, from Canada. But I guess also in consideration, especially of COVID-19 restrictions and the health crisis that we're facing. Thank you.
Sure. Well, I dropped a couple of resources in the chat. If you didn't see them yet, it's www.stopline3.org, as well as a Facebook page for the Ginny Collective to check out. But I think people should know that there are 4 camps along the route of the pipeline in 4 different tribal nations, and they're asking for bodies on the ground. They're asking for people to come and to stand in solidarity. And that has been the main request. Resources are great. You know, there is a way to give resources based upon these websites. But the biggest request is to help stop the work that continues, because the battle has been an uphill battle here in the United States to stop construction. And so similar to the Dakota Access Pipeline, people are putting their bodies on the ground. They're locking down to equipment. They're going inside, you know, pipelines and locking down, you know, before there's any oil flowing through. And so people should know that we have COVID in mind, you know, the restrictions, the masks, the safety in mind. And we have the, what do you call it, like legal aspects in mind as well, for people that could potentially get arrested, and for those that don't want to, you know, but want to be on site helping. It's kind of like DAPL, where there are people that are cooking, there are people that are keeping people warm, fire keepers, things of that nature. So that's the biggest request, is if you can be there in one of those 4 camps, be there. But I'll also look online to see how else you can support from afar.
Great, thank you. And thank you for posting the resources also in the chat. Here in British Columbia, there's a struggle going on against the TMX pipeline expansion. And in this struggle, part of what's happening is they are attempting to put a laydown area for the pipeline expansion in a park called Colony Farms. And people in the community of Coquitlam and Burnaby around Colony Farms Park have been organizing it against it. So I just wanted to let people know we're going to be putting a link in the chat to sign on to their petition. There was basically no transparency given to either the Indigenous peoples whose land the park is on, or the residents of the area that this park was going to be used for a laydown area for this disastrous TMX pipeline expansion. So I encourage people to sign on to that petition, no matter where you are located. So those are our questions here tonight. I want to be conscious of people's time, but I do want to ask our speakers if there's anything else they'd like to say to wrap up. Kelly, of course, you are welcome if you'd like to do a closing tonight after the speakers. We would be honored. But I'll go ahead and ask Viviana if there's anything you would like to say as we close here tonight.
Creo que es muy importante
I
este
think
encuentro.
that this meeting is very, very important. I was amazed because one thinks that in the first world, Germany, US, and Canada, things might be different. And the different thing is that they are countries that have more money, but conflicts between human beings and the interest, capitalist interests, of which the victims are the most vulnerable populations, as Thomas has said. This is an experience in all countries, all over the world. So this is something that I am amazed by. Also, that the knowledge of native peoples, these are pre-existing peoples that have been here for a much longer time than these new cultures. And I believe that they have to teach us that our way of life, or the way of life, has to be transformed. We have to start feeling that the world is not at the service of men, that nature is not at the service of men, but that we have to respect all beings in our surroundings. With this pandemic, we have discovered that the negligence and non-consideration for environments have led to a paralyzation of the world. This microorganism that has invaded the world completely stems from the devastation that human beings have made, humans that do not take into consideration the consequences of their acts. And this has to do with a lack of respect to something, to ecosystems. So I think that this is the path, and from each and every place that we are in, we have to start making changes and transformations in our own lives. There have to be, of course, public policies from the governments, but there also has to be a decision that coincides with what we want in the world, what we struggle for, and our day-to-day lives, the way that we live. This is a challenge, and some of the things that we have to change are going to be uncomfortable for us, probably, but we have to be coherent. I love silver. I love silver earrings. I love silver rings and bracelets. And at one point in my life, I said, this is not coherent. I cannot be fighting against all, gold and silver mines and have a lot of and I have necklaces and bracelets, and I had to leave them, and it was hard for me. It's maybe silly, but I believe that these are some of the challenges that we have to face. We have to understand that we have to make daily changes or quotidian changes in our lives so everything makes sense, because if not, it's going to be just an expression of a wish or desire. Real transformation, real change also has to do with our own lives, each and every one of us. I thank you all very, very much. I take away from this many beautiful things, and I have to tell Kelly that when you sang the first song while we were preparing and organizing, and I heard you sing, you have a lovely voice, and it reminds me of the songs and the singing of our native peoples here, the message with those tones that really, really fall deep into our feelings. Thank you very much. Thank you, all of you, sorry.
Thank you very much to Viviana Moreno from Noa Lamina and the communities of the self-organized people and neighbors of Esquiel, Argentina, in Chubut, Argentina, who have really shown us an incredible example of consistent and constant organizing. We know that we will continue to be in touch and support from here in Canada, the United States, around the world, and amplify our voices for system change, not climate change. This constant struggle we lead is to build a better world, and we can only do that if we are united internationally. I want to next ask Candy White from the Indigenous Environmental Network if you have anything you'd like to say as we close tonight.
I just want to say Matsigidads, which in Hiratsa means thank you. I want to tell everybody to Ariawagats, to go in a good way, to take everything you heard and, you know, translate it into some of the stuff Viviana was saying. If you can, you know, start that garden, start those seeds and do those small scale things. But as Thomas was relating to, every single tool in the toolbox should be used. There's not one definitive answer to the climate crisis. There's no one size fits all. I feel like the United States government sometimes comes off as believing that there's a one size fits all. There's not. With just transition, it's about who you are and where you are and what you can do with what you have. It's going to look different for everybody. And just understanding that it won't happen overnight, but that it can happen, I think is the most important thing. So we do what we can to change this brainwashed, colonized lifestyle that we have, because that was kind of forced upon us as individuals. But the struggle is not new. I mean, especially here in the US, we've been fighting for over 500 years. And it feels really good and refreshing to know that we're not alone and that there's people all over the place. And so again, just visit us at ienearth.org to follow along, because there's so many campaigns we're working on that it's hard to keep up. And I just really want to shout out to the grassroots and then to our sister organization in Canada, which is the Indigenous Climate Action Network. If you're not familiar with ICA, please look them up and get familiar and see some of the work that they're doing also. And lastly, to just say thank you. Thank you to the Climate Convergence. Thank you for holding it down and for putting on this webinar for us to have a platform to share our voices.
Thank you very much, Candy. It's a joy to also hear the kids in the background as you're talking and wrapping up and reminding us all of what we're fighting for, a better future and one that is also necessary. Thomas, I'll just, as you gather your thoughts, I'll just say that in the chat again, there's many important links, one of which is a link to past webinars that Climate Convergence has organized. On our website, there's a link where you can find them all. It's been an important development in our work with the COVID-19 pandemic to use this time to connect internationally, to have discussions with one another, and to really amplify the message of the need for climate justice and a better world into most cases people's homes at this time. So I encourage you to visit that link, share around the older webinars, and of course to get involved. So Thomas, I'll hand the floor over to you for any final words.
Yeah, just thank you very much. I'm not sure what time it is in Argentina right now for Viviana. Getting late, and for everybody else who's joining us from around the world and our translators as well. That's a hard job and we really appreciate it. And I just wanted to say, I think from 2020, we learned again how important, like how human beings are social animals and how important our connections are with each other, both personally and then like in how we interact with the world and how we change the world. And our work becomes amplified when we work together. I don't know how to explain the math, but it's not like 1 + 1 = 2 or 1 + 1 + 1 = 3. When people organize together and are able to make decisions together and to magnify and amplify what they're doing, 1 + 1 + 1 = 7 = 49, and it grows. And so if you can, like we'd love to have you at a Climate Convergence meeting. If you're not here, or if you have other priorities, just do your best, do what you can. And if there is a group or there is people in your neighborhood or around that you can organize with, try and do that as well. The stronger our organizations and our institutions are, the better we will all be. And we really value each other, and that human connection is something that we really need to focus and emphasize in this fight as well. But again, thank you very much, everybody, for staying and for doing everything.
And I'll say again that Thomas is the author of System Change, Not Climate Change. It came out on Battle of Ideas Press in 2019. The link to purchase will be in the chat. Again, it's basically very affordable for anyone that would like a copy. We're very happy to put one in the mail as part of our continuing effort to reach out to each other and to really think about how to build a better and stronger, more united climate justice movement. I will also say that, yes, indeed, in Argentina, it is nearly 1 o'clock in the morning for Viviana, and also for our two translators, Anna and Mercedes. We are very grateful for our time, or for your time, for your incredible talent to help us in translating this webinar and making sure it's simultaneously translated. It's very important we can learn other languages and participate in whatever language so we can build this stronger and more united movement. I will also just see if Kelly White, before we close for tonight, just to remind ourselves, we've been on multiple continents tonight. We heard from speakers from North and South America, all over Turtle Island. We've also heard from Germany and from the island of Cuba. Many voices. There are many more. We'll continue organizing these events. And if you have any ideas, please reach out to us and join us in organizing future webinars. Even if you're not here in Vancouver, no worries, that's quite all right. I think that the biggest message I'm going away with is a lot of hope and belief and will to put towards that hope and belief that this better world we're fighting for is possible and necessary. We see around us a world characterized by the coronavirus pandemic, but also racism and sexism and all the other ills of the system that we live under today. We recognize that this year will be the hottest year on record, with worsening hurricanes, droughts, and floods, disrupting and destroying the lives of people around the globe, especially those that already live in precarious situations or in developing countries, and especially the Indigenous peoples of the world. Looking towards 2021, the climate crisis will continue to be a critical issue for humanity, and building a consistent, collective, creative, and effective climate justice movement ready to fight for system change, not climate change, is more necessary than ever before. We look forward to working with all of you in this continued struggle. My hands up to all of you. We'll see you in the streets as soon as we can. And Kelly, would you like to send us off tonight? You're on mute, so you'll have to unmute yourself. And I'm going to go ahead as Kelly figures that out and close the translation so that everyone can hear Kelly's sound. So everyone will be returned to the main room.
Thank you, our relatives. The great spirit within you. Grateful for all the crucial information, the crucial sharing, straight from the heart, hit the soul, and anticipate supporting your endeavors. Viviana, I didn't know, I knew Canada's corrupt a little. I heard that there was mines around the world, but certainly interested to look into your endeavors here. And thank you for wonderful name there, Miss White. Thanks for the organizers, translators, all the participants this evening, and those that are around the world that unfortunately didn't have the time to share with us. Um, on my 6-day fast out of 10 days.
Hoy con nosotros.
Hello. So I'm thankful that to offer a northern song.
Sorry, Kelly, it went on mute again. Right as you said you're going to bring a northern song.
Northern song it is. So thankful for the generations that bring us to where we're at and the generation strength you have to bring us where we're going to go. There's no doubt this evening of making a better place and brothers and sisters helping one another. So I'd like to dedicate this song to brothers and sisters helping one another. And those superpowers that are out there, the stars, the grandma moon, Mini Wichoni, the water, thanking those ones too that that keep us going and give us the great spirit within us and our work. From Haida Gwaii, my dad's cousin's lands. Oh, We thank the creator of all good for the strength and the weaknesses that we have, that we're going through. And we're thankful for the strength of our ancestries that put the strength within our heart, mind, and body and soul to bring the world to a cleaner place. And we thank the indigenous people of the world where they're at, that hold the heart, mind, body, and spirit and soul of the world together. And all the corruption that we've all put on the world together. We've got to heal the world together, the earth. And I understand the people of the earth, indigenous people, are heart of the earth here on Turtle Island. You can't take the heart of the earth and expect to live. So strength to you all, and beauty to the movements that you're going with. And we're gonna break fast in Vancouver. We might get our ass kicked by the law, but 30 years now, probably over 40 years fighting for the corporations that kill our people too here in Vancouver. And we're now called February 14th Memorial March for Missing Murdered Women. So 10-day fast for those, and remembering the millions. Used to be 10 million here, and there used to be 10,000 in my village, and there's 1,200 now. And so we've almost, can hardly see the splash of our puddle because there hardly ain't none, but we're still heart of the earth, and we're grateful that all the messages that you have tonight that will be strengthened by one another's messages this evening. And we love the messages and carry on the work throughout this evening's messages through the heart, thankful for the unity created here this evening, and the best of the teams out there in the highest honor, healing our nations of united resistance to apathy. We are one bleed. All my relations, metakweyasi. Have a good day. The world's not going to be the same with you all out there. Power to you.
Gracias, Kelly. El mundo no va a estar el mismo después de este evento, se dijo Kelly. Gracias a todos y todos. Thank you to everyone for coming here tonight. We will continue our struggle together. Estamos unidos en esta lucha por nuestra madre tierra y las naciones indígenas, y hasta la próxima lucha. Thank you, everyone. We are united in the same struggle for our Mother Earth. Until the next struggle, we will see you soon. Good night. Buenas noches.